Hi guys, Small here. Today we're diving into a review of Vulpisfoglia, the standard 6-star operator featured in Lapland Altar's banner. As you may already know, Vulpisfoglia is Suzumom's mom. Yes, that's Suzumom, your favorite cute and funny supporter from Arknights. Naturally, Vulpisfoglia has earned the fun nickname Suzumom, and that's what we are rolling with for this review. Suzumom belongs to the Pioneer Vanguard archetype, combining survivability, crowd control, and solid damage output. Pioneers come with the handy trait of blocking 2 enemies and are generally designed to stay on the field for extended periods to get the most out of their kits. Suzumom follows this pattern, so keeping her on the field is crucial to maximizing her talents and skills. We'll dive deeper into how this archetype affects her overall value in the conclusion, so hang tight for that. For now, just remember, Suzumom is no exception to the Pioneer archetype. She needs time and space on the field to shine. Alright, let's see what Hypergriff has cooked up for Suzumom. Let's start with Suzumom's first talent, which adds some serious punch to her kit. When Suzumom first damages an enemy, she marks them for 10 seconds, and you can spot the mark as these cute feline eyes hovering above the enemy. While the mark is active, every attack she lands on the enemy deals additional earth damage equal to 30% of her attack. To get the most out of this talent, you'll want to focus your firepower within the 10-second window. Luckily, Suzumom's skill 3 is designed exactly for this purpose, letting her dish out rapid attacks in a short time to annihilate enemies, but we'll cover that in detail later. This talent shines against enemies with high defense but low magic resistance, a common trait among bulky shield bearers. This makes Suzumom an excellent early deploy unit, capable of holding the line against tough foes while generating enough DP to bring in your heavy hitters. One thing to note, the talent only triggers if Suzumom can actually damage the enemy. If they have a shield that completely nullifies her attack, the mark won't activate. For example, this boss has a damage absorbing shield. While the shield is active, the feline eyes won't appear, but as soon as the shield is down, there they are. The eyes show up. And here's where things get interesting. Let's take the Rat King as an example. His shield absorbs earth damage, so you'd think Suzumom's physical attacks would trigger her first talent, right? After all, physical damage is damage, and the talent activates on any damage. You'd expect to see the iconic Eyes of the Tiger over his head immediately, but as you can see, that's not the case. Despite Suzumom chipping away at his HP with her physical attacks, the talent doesn't activate. What's even more weird is that Rat King's shield, designed to absorb earth's damage, is actually taking a hit. Wait a second, Suzumom's basic attacks are supposed to deal only physical damage, right? So what's going on here? Only after the shield is fully gone do the eyes appear, and Suzumom starts absolutely wrecking him. We see the same thing happen with Madrock. Even though Suzumom's attacks damage Madrock through a shield, the Eyes of the Tiger refuse to show up until Thorns steps in to break the shield. Once it's down, the talent finally triggers, and the eyes appear, starting the 10-second countdown. So what's the deal here? My best guess is that the earth damage from her talent triggers instantly, even when the feline eyes don't show up. That would explain how Suzumom can chip away at Rat King's shield while dealing only physical damage. When the bonus earth damage actually hits the enemy's HP, that's when the eyes show up for 10 seconds. And after those 10 seconds, no more bonus earth damage for that enemy. Simple as that. Alright, enough theorizing about talent 1, let's move on to talent 2. Suzumom may excel as an offensive vanguard with great survivability, but at the end of the day she's still a vanguard, so it makes sense that Hypergriff gave her a second talent that helps with DP generation. Here's how it works. While Suzumom is on the field, natural DP generation is 10% faster. Sounds good, right? But there's a catch. In stages Just like Annihilation, where natural DP generation is set to 0, this talent does nothing. After all, 10% of 0 is still 0. This makes the talent feel weaker in situations where you need it most, like in stages with slow DP generation. And don't forget, Suzumom actually needs to be deployed for this effect to kick in. It doesn't work just by having her in your squad. So yeah, the DP generation boost is underwhelming. But don't worry, the second part of this talent makes up for it. If Suzumom doesn't take damage for 4 seconds, she starts regenerating 4% of her HP every second. And this is huge. It perfectly complements her role as a lane-holding vanguard, letting her handle waves of enemies without requiring constant healing support. Suzumom comes equipped with her X module, which grants her 8% additional attack and defense while blocking enemies, and enhances her first talent, increasing the AS damage she deals after marking an enemy. This module is clearly geared toward boosting Suzumom's offensive potential, but unfortunately the improvements are a bit underwhelming. The 8% attack boost doesn't do much to offset Suzumom's relatively low base attack. And while the extra AS damage sounds appealing, it's tied to the 10-second window of her first talent, which feels very restrictive. The difference in performance with this module, even against low resistance enemies, is barely noticeable. Let me show you a clip to highlight this. Honestly, I don't recommend investing in this module. Here's why. Suzumom's future Y module is likely to reduce her DP cost by 4, following the pattern of other Pioneer Vanguards like Texas, Saga, Siege and Flametail. If you've ever used Texas, you know how much of a game changer those 4 DP can be. Especially in tough stages where every second matters, and you urgently need a 2-block operator to handle an early enemy rush. As it stands, Suzumom's 14 DP cost without potential upgrades is quite steep for a Vanguard, and shaving up 4 DP would massively improve her usability in high pressure scenarios. Damage, while nice, isn't what defines a Vanguard's value in this meta, it's their ability to deploy quickly and generate DP. For now, my advice is to hold off on the X module and wait for the more impactful Y module to drop. Let's dive into Suzumom's skills, starting with skill 1. This one is as simple as it gets. Suzumom's next attack deals additional arts damage equal to up to 290% of her attack, and she generates 1 DP upon executing the attack. The skill has 3 charges, which makes it handy for clearing enemies after some downtime. This is your classic AFK skill, offering DP generation at a rate of 1 DP every 4 seconds. Honestly, this kind of DP generation is a joke in most scenarios. On top of that, I'm not sure if the arts damage from Talent 1 benefits from the skill's attack multiplier. Even if it does, I can't see any noticeable boost to the overall damage during the talent's 10-second window. So the synergy between this skill and the first talent is limited at best. Now, let's compare this to another AFK Vanguard skill, Siege's skill 2. Both have a power strike style and 3 charges, but Suzumom's skill 1 is clearly geared toward single target damage, whereas Siege's AoE capabilities make her a much better choice for handling enemy swarms. Let's talk about skill 2, an interesting option that combines DP generation, AoE damage and some powerful crowd control effects like slow and stun. Here is what it brings to the table. First, Suzumom gains 7 DP immediately upon activation. While this is better than nothing, it's honestly mediocre considering the 20-second cooldown. Skill 3 provides better DP per second and arguably more impactful effects. When activated, Suzumom's attack range expands to that of a Lord Guard, think Midnight, and she dishes out significant ATS damage to up to 6 enemies at once. But the real highlight is the crowd control. Slow is applied to all affected enemies, and if they are already slowed, they get stunned for 5 seconds instead. Given that this skill can hold 2 charges, this means that Suzumom can slow and immediately stun a group of enemies all by herself. The skill's effectiveness skyrockets when paired with an operator that can reliably apply slow to multiple enemies. Do you have anyone in mind? Yep, I bet we are all thinking about Ella. Okay, I was joking. Clearly, no one fits the bill better than Suzumom's very own daughter, Suzuran. It's heartwarming to see Hyperglyph create his mother-daughter synergy without making it feel forced. Suzuran's AoE slowing ensures that Suzumom's skill 2 hits its full potential, stunning enemies left and right, and creating a perfect control combo. One crucial detail about skill 2 is that it explicitly mentions the slow debuff, meaning it won't work with generic movement speed debuffs. This distinction can trip you up if you are pairing Suzumom with operators like Ascalon, who applies a movement speed debuff through their talent and skill. Let me show you an example. When paired with Suzuran, Suzumom's skill 2 immediately stuns enemies affected by slow. However, with Ascalon, despite her movement speed debuff being active, no stun is triggered. When using Suzumom with a slow supporter, you'll need to closely watch the enemies. Mistiming this skill can result in wasting a charge, which is a big deal given the 20-second cooldown and limited 2 charges. This aspect can feel a bit clunky in messy situations, where a lot of stuff is happening on screen. Another thing to note is that skill 2 won't hit blocked enemies behind Suzumom, which can feel restrictive in certain scenarios. This contrasts with operators like Chen, whose skill 2 has a similar range and cooldown, but can still affect blocked enemies directly behind her. Now let's dive into skill 3, the centerpiece of Suzumom's kit. Like I said earlier, her talents revolve around it. If you're planning to use her, this is the skill to specialize in. The first talent is all about stacking attacks within a 10-second window to boost your AS damage. Skill 1, with its limited charges and single target focus, isn't the best tool for the job. Skill 2, while hitting multiple targets, has a long cooldown and again limited charges, making it less ideal for this talent. Skill 3 though, it's a match made in heaven. It cranks up Suzumom's attack speed to insane levels, letting her unleash a storm of hits, and each one can trigger that sweet extra damage from her talent. The catch? The attack speed boost slowly fizzles out, hitting 0 by the end. It's basically in a skill 2 but in reverse. Oh, and guess what? Skill 3 lasts exactly 10 seconds, the same as the talent's bonus damage. Coincidence? I think not. If you needed any proof that the devs designed Suzumom with skill 3 in mind, this is the one. But wait, there's more. Skill 3 also gives her a big attack boost, expands her range by 1 tile, and even adds a tiny stun to her attacks. Sure, the stun is short, but it's just enough to keep interrupting enemies. And no, despite what the translation says, the enemies don't need to be blocked. What it really means is she can hit as many enemies as her block count, 2 in this case. Skill 2 works great if you pair Suzumom with Suzuran, mother-daughter dream team, but with skill 3 they can tear through bosses like nobody's business. I've got some clips to show you just how powerful this duo can be, and let's face it, the image of mother and daughter wrecking the battlefield together is too sweet to pass up. Not only does skill 3 bring pain and crowd control, but it also has a sneaky little trick up its sleeve. If you manage to kill an enemy during the skill, Suzumom gets camouflage. That means ranged enemies won't even look at her, but there's a catch. If a ground enemy locks onto her, she temporarily loses the camo. Once they're dead though, boom, camouflage is back. But keep in mind that if you pop the skill again, she'll need to bag another kill to keep camouflage. camo is not just for sneaky vibes, it pairs perfectly with her second talent. This restores her HP if she hasn't been attacked for 4 seconds, and camouflage can help with that. But that's not all. Recall that skill 3 has a ton of stuns. If there aren't too many enemies around, you can chain stun them long enough to trigger their HP regen mid-fight. That's a huge boost to her survivability and makes her a solid line holder. Now you're probably thinking, that's gotta be all, right? Nope. The skill also gives you 9 DP every time you use it, regardless of the fact that there are enemies in range. Sure, with 9 DP on an 18-second cooldown, she's not gonna dethrone top-tier DP printers, but hey, free DP is free DP, right? Alright, let's stack Suzumom up against the top vanguards for DP generation. Spoiler alert, she's holding her own, but when you stretch it out over 30 seconds, it's clear she's lagging a bit behind the competition. Oh, and check this out, Chilchak made the list. In case you missed the Dungeon Meshi collab, this tiny guy is an absolute DP monster. His first skill, at level 7, cranks out a random 4 to 9 DP every 10 seconds. Insane, right? But there's a catch, it's an offensive recovery skill, so Chilchak needs to be near enemies to trigger it. His second skill is the classic Agent DP generator, but with bonus dodge. Pretty handy if you want him to tank a couple of hits, yes, even from someone like Patriot. Now, Suzumom's skill 3 puts up somewhat higher DPS numbers to Ine's skill 2, as you can see from these clips. But there's a downside, she can't hit aerial enemies. So what's Suzumom's edge? Well, unlike agents, she doesn't need enemies around to pop her skill. That means you can keep her out of harm's way and fire it off as soon as it's ready. No awkward waiting for an enemy to stroll in. And let's not forget the quick cooldown, 18 skill point for a 10-second skill. You'll be spamming this like crazy. It's not top tier DP generation, but it's reliable, safe, and always ready when you need it. Alright, let's wrap this up. Suzumom has proven herself to be a solid on-field vanguard with plenty of tricks up her sleeve. She's great for holding a lane early on without backup, all while giving you a little DP boost on the side to help you field your heavy hitters faster. Within the Pioneer Vanguard archetype, she definitely stands out as a modern and versatile option. But she's not without issues. Her DP generation is decent, sure, but is still a step behind the top picks, and as a pioneer she wants to stay on field to make the most out of her kit. And that raises a big question, where does a Vanguard like Suzumom fit in today's meta? It's a critical question if you're debating whether she's worth pulling, especially if you care about strength more than anything else. Of course, if you're all about the design or just love the character, then hey, bring mommy home. No one is stopping you. Now, to answer that meta question, let's take a step back and look at which vanguards players are actually using these days and why. I combed through the 4 most watched guides on YouTube for the toughest recent events: Design of Strife, CCB1 and CCB2. Here is the breakdown of vanguards featured in those videos. Ines, 10 appearances, Myrtle, 5, Bagpipe, 2, Texas, 2, Milsis, 1. This paints a pretty clear picture. For most players, vanguards are all about interacting with the DP mechanic first and then offering utility. That's why, even after all these years, and despite the shiny new 6-star vanguards, Myrtle is still a queen in most teams. She churns out DP like no one else, letting you deploy your key operators fast and then retreat her to free up a slot. But Myrtle isn't sitting at the top anymore. Enter Ines. a DP generator with way more utility. She can reveal invisible enemies, slow them down, bind them, and even dish out some decent damage. And here's the kicker, some of her utility stays active even after you retreat her, which is rare for Vanguards. Plus, she can attack from a distance and throw in some crowd control, so leaving her on the field isn't a bad call either. Oh, and did I mention agents like her have half the redeployment time of other Vanguards? Yeah, Ines is absolutely stacked. Then there's Bagpipe, who's more of a team player. Her talent gives all Vanguards in the squad extra initial skill points, letting them pump out DP faster. You can also drop her to handle an early wave, snag some DP by taking out trash mobs, then retreat her to refund her full DP cost. Again, this is very DP centered. And again, you're not going to have Bagpipe on field for long. So where does that leave Pioneers or any Vanguards that need to stay on the field and don't excel at DP generation? Honestly, not in a great spot. But wait, Texas. Yeah, Texas! A 5-star Pioneer Vanguard from way back when the game launched. And guess what? She's still getting used in hard stages. Texas is proof that Pioneers can carve out a niche if they bring the right mix of utility. Maybe there's hope for Suzumom after all. Why is Texas still hanging around? It's definitely not for the DP. Her skills generate very little and the cooldowns are long. Her DP cost isn't fully refunded like Bagpipes either. And no, she's not staying on the field to tank enemies. Let's be real, at higher difficulty stages, enemies hit so hard that your best defense is just wiping them out fast. The only tanks you'll see surviving in those situations are absolute units like Hoshiguma, and maybe Seria and Shu with their scale 3, but that's a whole different story. So what makes Texas viable? Most of the time she's dropped to handle an early enemy rush, either by blocking them or stunning them with her skill 2. She generates a bit of DP, then gets put back to free up a slot for the operators who will carry the stage. In all this, her DP cost is essential. With full potential and her Y module, she costs just 7 DP. That's dirt cheap. Now, in most cases, Ines can do all of that and more, which leaves Texas as a budget-friendly F2P option for those who don't have Ines but still need to handle those early waves. But there are a few small drawbacks with Ines that might leave room for a good Pioneer Vanguard to sneak in. Here's the deal. Ines only has one block. She costs 11 DP compared to Texas 7. She needs to hit enemies during her skill to generate DP, and attack speed debuffs eat her hard. So here's the big question, can Suzumom step into Texas' role? Well, as we have seen, she can definitely manage an early enemy rush. Her skill 3 stuns can keep enemies at bay for 10 seconds, which is a massive upgrade over Texas' 3-second stun from skill 2. Plus, Suzumom can generate DP without relying on enemies, and has a strong attack speed buff, so debuffs don't slow her down too much. The real sticking point? Her DP cost. At 14 DP cost, which is double Texas cost unless you pull dupes, she's a much bigger drain on your early game DP pool, and in a DP hungry environment where every point counts, that's a tough pill to swallow. Right now, I can't wholeheartedly recommend pulling for Suzumom, unless you're missing Ines or the other top Vanguards we have talked about. Don't get me wrong, she's good, especially with the skill 3, and she's a blast to use, but when it comes to the really tough stages, she's going to struggle in her current state. That said, Suzumom does have the potential to join the big leagues, just like Texas did, if Hypergriff decides to give her a little love. Here is what could make a difference: a new module that drops her DP cost to 10 or even 8 with potentials, and maybe tweaks her natural DP generation so it works even when she is off field, and possibly increases the multiplier from 10 to 20%. With those changes, she could easily become a strong upgrade to Texas for early enemy waves, or even a sidegrade to Bagpipe, generating DP safely from the backline. At that point, she'd finally have a solid place in high pressure content, especially for players who don't have Ines, or for niche situations where Ines or Myrtle don't cut it. What kind of situations, you ask? Picture those early rushes that a single target operator just can't handle fast enough. or the mire tiles in the read event that reduce attack speed over time, or enemies like Frost that wreck the attack speed of operators around them. In scenarios like these, Suzumom could be a lifesaver, but until she gets a proper module, we are not quite there yet. Of course, that's just my 2 cents. I'm not claiming to have all the answers, and hey, maybe you see things differently. Hopefully, this review gave you enough info to make up your own mind, and that's what matters most. Alright, that's it for this one. Thanks for watching and catch you in the next video.